Shortbox Nation, I am sitting by someone that I was really looking forward to when I walked into Collective Con. I am sitting with Milton Yerolemou. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Yes, awesome. You may know him from Game of Thrones as Syrio Forel, and also from Star Wars Force Awakens, he played a space pirate, aka a bar patron as well. Syrio, I'm sorry, that's my bad. I didn't mean Syrio.
So you can call me Syrio.
Milton.
I mean, look, there's pictures of me all over the place as
Miltos,
Syrio.
yes. Miltos.
It's an easy mistake to make.
How are you enjoying Collective Con?
I'm having a great time. It's been my first time in Florida.
Oh, welcome.
So I've never been to Florida before. So everything is brand new for me. But yeah, it's been great. And I'm really happy to be here with Richard and Luke and Joe and Tom.
Yeah, they're really fan.
Yeah.
I got a chance to talk to Joseph and then Luke. They were really, really awesome,
Yeah.
man. I mean, and I got a chance to sit in on the Game of Thrones panels. You guys shared some awesome stories, man. So I want to thank you for finding time to come down to Jacksonville, being a part of Collective Con.
I love it. I was just saying to someone just before you turned up that the strange thing is that most of the time we are always working in isolation, you know.
Huh.
We make TV shows and movies and we do theater. I mean, the theater is slightly different because you're performing. Eventually you perform in front of an audience and you get an idea. It's winter is coming.
My back just turned to ice. It's all like chilly in here.
So we kind of do it in isolation.
Yeah.
So what's really nice about doing conventions because of Game of Thrones is that you get feedback and you get to meet people and see how the stuff that you do that you think is something you do for yourself. I mean, we love the process of making a movie as much as seeing the movie, sometimes more so, you know?
Yeah.
But it's great when you get feedback and it's great when you meet the fans and it's fantastic to just interact with people and realize that what you do actually has an effect on people.
Wow. So, and you mentioned this isn't your first rodeo. This isn't your first con, right? You've been to a few conventions.
Yeah.
Have you been able to tell the difference in, I guess, like the energy and the excitement in fans with the last season currently being played? Is there a difference? Have you been able to spot it? Or is it always this crazy?
That's a really interesting question. I did a con last year, and all the hype was about why it was about the time when normally Game of Thrones would be being shown, right? And everything, people were so hyped about it because it wasn't on. Let alone when it is on. So they were like, I can't believe it's supposed to be on now and there's nothing to watch. And we're like, why do we have to wait so long for the last season and all of that? So there was hype just because it wasn't on.
Wow.
And of course, this year, being here, especially because last weekend we were in Texas doing a convention there, we realized that being at the premiere and watching it with like 300 people was an intense experience. And
Wow.
watching it with people who had been waiting for almost 2 years, that was quite something.
That is awesome.
That was intense.
Wow.
The energy was intense.
So when it comes to, in your opinion, who's got the more dedicated and or hype fan base, Star Wars or Game of Thrones?
I think Game of Thrones beats the Star Wars fan base. The
Wow.
Star Wars fan base. So the Star Wars universe is something that is has been owned for decades. Remember when the 3 films, the very first, well, you weren't, you're too young. I remember when the first 3 films came out, right? I was a child, but still, I remember when they came out, and I remember the fact that even when the first 3 films came out, they talked about the possibility of it being a trilogy of a trilogy. So that there was going to be 9 films. And we were so stoked about that, but that was just a rumor, and no one ever did anything about it until obviously George Lucas created the prequels, should we say. So in that time, between the original films and the prequels, people wrote novels, people wrote comic books, there were fan theories, there was the whole universe was like expanded so that the fans kind of feel that they own it.
Yeah.
kind of that's one of the reasons why the controversy over The Last Jedi was so intense, because the fans were like, hang on a minute, is this, I mean, it's split opinion. And, I thought Last Jedi was a fantastic film, but it kind of, people were like, but because they felt they owned it, So that was an interesting thing. The difference with Game of Thrones is that the books, George R.R. Martin's books, have been around for maybe 20 years now, and they are loved and pored over, and those descriptions of that world kind of has cemented in people's imaginations. So the theories are kind of all based in forensic attention to detail. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
Whereas we don't have Star Wars books. We have Star Wars books after the movies were made, but that's different. We had a book. We had a series of books that described a world in such detail that people understood it so well that they could second guess where the writer was going to go next. So that level of dedication and that level of nerddom, I think, really belongs to Game of Thrones more so than Star Wars. Anyway, that's kind of what I think.
No, you provided one hell of evidence and argument. I don't know if I can debate that right now. So speaking about going back to Game of Thrones and the books, how did you prepare for the role of Syrio Forel? The sword master from Bravos that teaches Arya very early on. I mean, how did you go about getting, whether physically in shape or getting ready for the role, or did you go through the books? I mean, how did you go about preparing for that role of Syrio?
So the first time when I heard about the audition, I decided to go and buy the first book. So I read Game of Thrones, or as the book is called, A Game of Thrones, I think. And I read it simply for research, so that I had information for going into the audition. I knew also that they had asked for someone in the casting breakdown, they'd asked for someone who had sword fighting experience, which I could tell them that I had because I'd worked with fight choreographers in theatre quite a lot. I worked at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and in those plays there are a lot of sword fights and kind of close combat weaponry fights. So I knew I had experience doing that, but when I got cast, I realized I needed to work with someone because I had to create a style of movement and fighting that didn't exist.
Wow.
We had to create a water dance that isn't described in the books.
Wow. So this was kind of your brainchild.
Well, it wasn't my brainchild, but that's what I knew I had to do. I had to create a style.
Something unique.
And it couldn't be based on a particular fighting style. So I asked my agent to get in touch with HBO and say, can you get me someone to train with? And they, beyond my wildest dreams, came up with William Hobbs, who just Google that name and you will see his long list of credits since the 70s of all period sword fighting. This guy has choreographed all of that stuff. And they got this man to be my mentor, and for 2.5 weeks we worked solidly on creating a style for who this character was. And I of course I turned up going, so what are the fight moves, what are we going to do? And he was like, no, we should start from a character point of view. I want to know who this person is. I want you to tell me everything you know about this character, and once I understand who this character is, then we will start to find what the style of the movement is and what the style of the fight is going to be.
Wow. And
that was an amazing, just him saying that made me understand something, which is, anyway, he said this to me anyway, as an actor, you want to do the showing off, you want to do the wire work, you want to do stuff that is physically impossible. But the difference is that William said to me, William Hobbs said to me, when you're a master, when you are the teacher, you do less. You do absolutely the least possible, because if you are the best at what you do, you have nothing to prove. You have nothing to prove. You have the whole idea of the words that he says and his philosophy towards how to fight and how to be aware of your situation was all based in kind of Eastern philosophies. I think that's kind of quite obvious. But the whole idea is that never show off. Wow. Showing off is for people who don't care about getting killed. For him, it was all about stillness, complete focus, and being present in the moment. And that stuff is fantastic. And he said also, you know, if you're really good at fighting, you will fight in the most efficient way possible. And since then, learning, as I've learned, I mean, I do sword fight classes at conventions, like I do the water dance. I teach people how to choreograph their own fights. But it's always a thing that I go back to. It's like, you know, the people who are the best of the stuff that they do the least of it.
Wow.
A teacher will never show off his skills. That's why it's so great. I mean, it's great, but it's also a bit rubbish. Why, when we see Yoda in the original movies, he's this decrepit old little alien who barely can walk. But when he pulls the plane, the X-Fighter out of the
swamp,
you realize just how powerful he is. And that is what I love about it. It's the misdirection.
That's really well said. So I've got to ask, it sounds like you had this really unique experience learning how to get the sword fights, kind of getting into the head of Syrio Forel. How did you take it when you got the script and you had to read your death scene? So early on, too.
Yeah, I know, but this is showbiz. It's like, I kind of accepted it. I realized it. I was just pleased that I had, I think initially we had just 2 scenes in the two episodes I was going to be in. But ultimately, Dave and Dan, the creators, said to me that we need more. In the books, Syrio is talked about rather than you see what he does. Okay. And Dave and Dan said, we need to put another scene in. And then they wrote that scene, in episode 6 of season 1, where it doesn't belong in the books. You don't see it in the books. It's been created simply for the TV show where Syrio talks about the gods and how there is only one God and his name is death, and there is only one thing we say to the god of death, and that is not today. And that is doesn't belong in the books. That was a complete from the imagination of the writers and the creators, and I think it's kind of it's my favorite scene, and it's so funny that it doesn't exist in the books, but it just goes to show you how clever those guys are, and how even when they create something that isn't based in the books, it
just fits in.
It just fits in. It fits in. Of course, and it becomes something very powerful and quite profound. So yeah, that stuff is, that's really exciting. That stuff.
Do you watch the show more or less since your character exited, and so early on in season 1? Did you watch the new episode with everyone else in the world around?
Yeah, I did. I was in a bar with about 300 people watching the first episode. That was really intense.
That sounds like a way to watch it.
Yeah, really cool. The great thing about Game of Thrones, the reason why I think it's such a phenomenon, is that even at the time when we had stopped tuning in to watch TV programs because we all stream our favorite things that we watch now, even at that time when people have just stopped watching television in the way that we used to, Game of Thrones make people come together and watch them together. There's communities based on them making parties and having death pools and all of these things whereby people work and experience it together. Wow. And I think that's amazing because that happens everywhere I go. Even friends of mine say that they don't watch it by themselves. They watch it with their friends. They invite friends around and they have a Game of Thrones evening, and they have to watch it when it gets broadcast, because if you don't, then it's over, because you will find out what happens in the episode.
Whether you like it or not.
You will be really upset with yourself.
Did you get to keep any memorabilia from the show?
Nothing. I didn't even get. We kept breaking that stick. in the fight with the Lannisters. They kept breaking it over and over, so there was loads of cast-offs. And I really wanted to take a little broken piece of sword home with me, but no. All of that stuff is all locked down. They have exhibitions all the time, so every little thing that you use is preserved for posterity.
Oh, wow. I was going to ask, what is it? I mean, do you have a memory from your time filming or your, something about the cast that you hold on to, or your favorite memory after, everything that you went through filming it, that gets brought up watching the series or even talking about it now?
I think it's more to do with the memory. I funnily enough, I bumped into Alfie Allen in the airport. He was on his way back from LA. I think he'd just been to the premiere, and I was on my way out to the States. And we had just met just for like 15 minutes. And the one thing I said to him is, I really remember that first night where we all stood outside the hotel that we were all staying in Belfast. Mm-hmm. We hadn't shot anything yet, but we had all turned up and we'd had the first reading. We'd read the first 3 episodes all together.
Stand by.
And I said to him, I really remember that evening. We were all so fresh-faced. We were all smoking. We were so nervous. We were all so nervous. We were racked with nerves because we knew we were embarking on something that we didn't know about. That was obviously a big deal because HBO was making it, but we had no idea. And that memory, I remember. We were all standing outside and we just were talking about what it might be. And we had no idea.
Wow.
And I really remember that. I remember it so vividly. I remember who was there. I remember what we were doing and what we said. But it was... And that's really what I hold on to. I hold on to that and the fact that, that was the calm before the storm.
So speaking about some of the projects that you're working on now, what are you doing now outside of, ever since that you've left Game of Thrones? I can only imagine... people still come up and you're Syrio, but what are you working on now?
So I just I've got an episode in the new season of The Crown.
Nice.
Season 3, which will be coming out maybe at the end of this year. I'm not quite sure. They don't really tell us. So, we find out when it's ready to go. So I've been doing that. I literally have just finished about 10 days ago filming the sequel to The Hitman's Bodyguard in London with Samuel L. Jackson and Ryan Reynolds and Selma Blair.
That's awesome.
Which was really awesome because it's quite funny. You come to conventions and you see people and they're like, they geek out about meeting you and they get nervous and excited. I guarantee you, I had to play a high status character who was trying to kill. I'm not going to give anything away. I just played a high status character who was trying to kill Samuel L. Jackson. If you know anything about that movie or the first movie, that's kind of a given, right? Mm-hmm. That's not giving anything away. But I had to do it. I was doing it to Samuel L. Jackson, and was all in my brain. I was just going, "Oh my God, that's Samuel L. Jackson, man! He's like, I'm talking to him."
How are you not fanboy over Samuel L. Jackson?
I mean,
come on.
and so, I was very excited about that, and I think it's going to be fun. So, that's the most recent thing I've been doing.
Awesome. And where can people stay in touch with what you got going on? Are you on Twitter or social media?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and you can find me under my name, Miltos Yerolemou.
Awesome. Miltos, I want to say thank you so much for finding time to talk with me. Enjoy the rest of your Collective Con weekend, man.
Thank you so much.